So, Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District Board for Thursday, March 24th, 2022 to order. And the only thing I didn't have here was your recognition of traditional territories. What do you say?
Comox First Nation.
Okay.
Yeah, traditional and ceded lands for Comox First Nation.
Okay. So our recognition of Indigenous is, we're coming to you from the traditional unceded lands of the Comox First Nation. And in camera meeting, no adoption of minutes. So Comox, move adoption. Thank you. And seconded.
Second.
Yep. No, it was already seconded by Director Unger. So any discussion? Seeing no hands, we'll call a question. All in favor, or sorry, any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. On to business arising from the minutes. Any business arising? Seeing none, we'll move on to the management report. Item 1. Thank you.
Member C.
Yeah, it was moved by Greaves, seconded by Lee. Discussion on the management report. Any questions? Don't see any hands up. So on the motion, any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Item 2, strategic planning update. And did staff want to make any comments? Thank you, Vice Chair Hillian and Greaves. And Russ.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Directors, and James Warren, Deputy CAO, is here to present this report and answer any of your questions.
Thanks, Russell, and good morning, Chair, and through the Chair to the Board. This is a very brief update staff report on the Board's strategic planning that it's been conducting over the last while. There's 3 primary topics covered under strategic planning. The first one being the increased funding to rural and remote community health facilities. The Board's policy has been updated to reflect $10,000 now being contributed to the original 6 remote community health clinics, and outreach is underway for the additional 11, the 11 that the Board noted through the strategic planning. So that outreach will continue, and as needed, we would report back to the Board to be able to update the policy to have additional funding go to those rural clinics if there's an interest in receiving that funding. Okay. Secondly, the other 2 topics for the Board include the health services hub concept and the long-term care facility that's proposed for Campbell River. Those discussions are continuing with Island Health as Island Health is developing a business case for the long-term care facility and is also looking at its leased facilities in the Comox Valley to try to consolidate those leases and look to a health services hub. Island Health staff have been challenged most recently with the Omicron variant in the pandemic, and so are still looking to put some time into the long-term care and the health services hub. If Scott McCartan is on the line, I'm not sure that he is, but if he is, he can provide a brief update on the long-term care facility business case. I do just want to also mention that the Board instructed that advocacy be undertaken to try to look to changes to the Hospital District Act, and that correspondence is ongoing with the ministry around trying to identify some changes to modernize the Hospital District Act. I see Scott's on the line, so maybe Scott, if you could provide just a brief update on some timelines around the business case and the long-term care facility in Campbell River.
Thanks, James. Apologies for being late. I had another meeting that ran over. Yeah, we're on the tail end of business case or business plan development for the proposed 150-bed long-term care facility on the Campbell River Hospital campus. Our hope is that we can submit that to ministry within the next month, after which it would go to Treasury Board for review If approved, then we would, if the budget were approved, then we would proceed to design and construction and procurement, which would likely take 3 to 4 years before the facility were finally completed. But as part of that business plan submission, it would be helpful to understand whether the regional hospital district had any interest in participating, as Treasury Board will be reviewing all of the potential cost sharing as part of the business plan review process. So those are our timelines, and I'll pass it back over to you, James.
Thanks, Scott. And Mr. Chair, if there's any questions, we'd be happy to entertain.
Any questions on the IFC? I have Director Abram, Moglove, and Lee. So, Director Abram.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, James, for the report. If you could just refresh my memory, the other 11 facilities, do you happen to know off the top of your head? What were they? Which ones?
I'd have to, if you give me just a second, I can double check on that. Yeah, it's remote and Indigenous community healthcare facilities. If you give me just a minute, I can pull that up and let you know.
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, you were supposed to dig into your notes, Jim, and look them up again.
My notes didn't show the names of the 11, showed the others.
Yeah, previous reports did though. Yeah, anything else, Jim? And maybe what we'll do is we'll come back.
First of all, I just like,
while
if you,
James looks it up,
I've got them here.
we'll move on to the next one on the speakers list.
Mr. Chair, I've actually got them right here. I can
You got them now, James?
read them out. Yeah.
Okay.
So the original 6 is the Cortez Health Center, the Gold River Health Clinic, the Cayucot Health Center, the Sayward Health Center, the Tassis Health Center, and Zabalvis Health Center.
Mhm.
And the additional 11 is the Quadra Island Medical Clinic, Denman Island Health Center, Hornby Island Health Center, Wee-Wai-Kum First Nation Kwaikutl District Council Health Center, that's one. The Wee-Wai-Kai First Nation Health Center, the Clahuth First Nation Health Center, Homalco First Nation Health Center, Lakwiltak Family Life Society, Comox First Nation Health Center, and the Wache Friendship Center.
Okay, thank you.
okay, so my question on the Indigenous ones is related to, I don't believe any of those are treaty situations where they are actually members of the CSRHB or whatever, are they?
I believe these are independent health centers. The ones that I just listed.
So the question would be that
The only
why
treaty
would we
that,
be funding them?
the only treaty that, or one,
Cayucot one, I know it.
yeah, that's the only one that's been through treaty.
Okay, so if they haven't been through treaty and they haven't joined the board or they haven't joined the hospital board, then why would they qualify, or why would we be looking at naming them as facilities under this, broader scope of funding, where there may be funding elsewhere, federally or provincially, rather than at the local taxpayer level, which is totally understandable for Cayucot because they're part of our local government now. So in the north, but as far as I know, none of these are. So it's just a question. Can you answer it?
The current board policy for funding the 6 rural health centers. It's just that, it's a board policy. Those health centers presumably also receive funding from other locations and sources. The board expressed interest in expanding the number of recipients, the number of clinics that could receive the grant funding. And so it was identified that there's the 11 additional health centers that I've named. And yes, presumably they would also receive funding from other sources and other centers. And if the board amends its policy to add any one or more of those 11, then we would look to have those centers named as named health facilities through the ministry, and the board would provide that funding. So,
And would that funding be at the $10,000 level?
that's what's being contemplated right now.
Okay, well, I've expressed my concern. I'll leave it at that. So glad to see Quadra's on there. And some of the others that were, that are within our jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you, Director Mogul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, let me express how pleased I am to be back at this board table now that my stint at the Island Health Board is over. I'm no longer in a conflict of interest. My question is related to the long-term care facility, and forgive me if this has been dealt with in previous meetings. I just want to confirm that this is 150 net new beds as opposed to replacement beds. I think that's really important to know, and as far as I know it is, but I just want that confirmed.
Yes, I can confirm that the current proposal would be net new beds. There may be, well, there are a lot of long-term care patients currently in hospital that will move into those beds. Yep. To free up hospital capacity. So they won't be all vacated for individuals in community, but they are planned to be net new relative to our existing stock. They're not replacing any existing stock.
That's great to hear that. Thank you so much.
Okay, Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remain skeptical about investing in that long-term care facility. I don't think that this board can afford to go into long-term care. It's a really expensive proposition. And I also feel that our current hospital, we did say that we wanted to expand it, because when the 2 hospitals were built, they were built under capacity. And I was just talking last night to one of our former directors from the Seward Valley, who's in the hospital right now. She's in a little closet room with no sink, no shower, no nothing, just shoved into any available space. And it appears that the hospital is over capacity at all times. So I just would like to have some comment from Mr. McCartan about the amount of people that are taking up beds in the hospital now, and if we will need to expand the facility. We grew our population by 8 to 9% in both the Comox Valley and Strathcona, and we're going to be looking at more people coming in, more need for hospital facilities. So where are they going to be when we're shoving people into side rooms without toilets and sinks?
Okay.
Thanks, Director Warren. Sort of relates to my comments to Director Moglov around the alternate level of care patients in the hospital. So we have a significant number of patients in both hospitals that are awaiting long-term care placement, but can't be discharged from hospital because we don't have enough long-term care beds. And the current cost to construct a new hospital bed is around $5.5 million per bed, whereas we can construct a long-term care bed for about $700,000. So we're getting, what is that, 7 to 8 times as much value for our money by investing in long-term care rather than building net new hospital beds, because we achieve the same outcome by building long-term care beds and shifting those patients that are currently in those acute care beds into long-term care. So it is a it is a much more economical way to create hospital capacity. And that's the hope and intent of expanding long-term care in the community.
Thank you for your answer, but I've had a lot of experience with long-term care facilities personally, and I don't see that. Long-term care people do not get medical care per se. They are not medical patients. They're just, you know, put into these long-term care facilities to be fed and
You have a question, Director
So,
Lee?
I don't agree that it's the same level of care that they get. And I don't agree that they shouldn't get that
Okay.
level of care.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
we need to have room for our new facilities to expand.
There's a couple of points I had before I go to second time speakers, Director Abram. Scott, my understanding was kidney chairs were supposed to be included in the 150 bed facility.
Not supposed to. There was a request to explore whether we could include those
Okay.
in the new long-term care facility, and we have explored that option. It's likely not going to be supported through this funding process, but we can still ask.
Yeah, I think it's important to ask because right now there is no kidney chairs in Campbell River whatsoever, which means everybody has to travel some down to Nanaimo. And it ties into the Indigenous part of our facility as well, because they have a higher incidence of need for that. Second comment, and then I'll go to the second time speakers, is just to remind everyone that we built acute care facilities, and the number of beds in each hospital was based on the acute care needs. And unfortunately, when we run short of long-term care facilities, they end up being kept in hospital. And that's not an appropriate place for treatment for somebody that should be in a long-term care facility. And we end up being overcrowded all the time, but not based on the size of the design size of it. It was designed as an acute care facility. And personally, I think we need those additional long-term care beds to solve the overcapacity issues in our acute care hospitals. Director Abram, your second time.
Yeah, real quick on that particular point, I wasn't going to speak on it, but I am now. The long-term care beds definitely needed, but the question came up in my mind from one of the comments made about, how do you provide the medical care? Where do we get the medical staff to provide whatever medical care those people would have been getting if they had stayed in the hospital itself? Apparently there isn't any medical staff available anywhere. So that's the first part. The main reason I put my hand up was to change the topic. I'm sorry, but to go on to the service hub. This was talked about at the beginning. We were brought back a report concerning consolidation of all of the different facilities within the Comox Valley, that you have, this service offered over there and this service offered over there. And let's look at building a facility that will house them all in one place. And I've been dead set against that ever since day one. I think it's completely insane to try and build anything these days with the cost of things when you may already have a long-term lease, a license, or a rental situation or whatever in an existing building that is providing the service, if it's mental health or if it's, addiction services or whatever other kinds of services that get provided from all of those unconsolidated places. I think that that's something that we should really be taking a closer look at and not considering building any kind of a facility that will consolidate services just for the purpose of consolidation. I mean, that's really all it's for. It really doesn't make any sense to me to move away from existing structures that we already have.
Okay, just before I go to Director Wally, just at our last strategic meeting, we covered off all these topics. This is the management report or strategic planning update. And the last resolution from the board was that we staff explore the options. So this is an update of what that exploration looks like currently. And it'll be up to the board to decide whether they want to be involved in one or the other or both. And all this is a update on what sits, where things sit. And thanks, Scott, for being here today to give us Island Health's perspective and update where we're at. So that's basically where we're at. And I will move to Director Wally and then to Scott McCartan from Island Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Questions for staff as they examine the possibility of these things. I wonder if they're taking into consideration the fact that in today's economy, with the cost of inflation or inflation raising the cost of almost every good, and many citizens struggling to make ends meet, and it looks like we have the high possibility of a major recession on the horizon. If these factors have been taken into account when we consider raising taxes or spending additional funds on these things that aren't our responsibility.
And
The short answer is yes, absolutely. That's part of the analysis that we would be working through with Island Health and looking at the options to explore and presenting those considerations back to the board.
okay. Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to answer a couple of Director Abrams' questions just around the staffing. So if we have long-term care patients in the acute care facilities as ALC patients, generally we will cohort them onto one unit and provide them the same type of care that they would receive in long-term care, so that we're not spending valuable RN time on caring for a patient that only needs an LPN or far less intensive care within hospital, but that patient is still encumbering a hospital room that is required for higher level of care. So if we transition those patients out of acute into long-term care, we can pull some of those hospital resources or the LPN resources with them. Obviously, we will need to hire new staff, and that's going to be a challenge for sure. But I can assure you that the resources in hospital are not being wasted on these patients, because we try to cohort them and care for them as efficiently as possible, although they are in the wrong care setting. In terms of the consolidation, it's not just about moving all of these services to the same location. It's also about replacing very, very old infrastructure in which the services are currently located. So if you go to some of the public health units in Comox, you'll note that they are in portable trailers. We've had significant infrastructure issues with those portable trailers, and much of our leased infrastructure is very old at end of life. So we do need to renovate and replace. And so that is part of the rationale for consolidation, is that we can take the opportunity to both gain the efficiencies and economies of scale of having everybody located in the same place, but also replacing that very old and outdated infrastructure.
Good, thank you. And, Director Unger.
Thank you, Chair. Scott, I just want to confirm what you said about the cost. Did you say long-term bed cost is $700,000 per bed?
Don't quote me on that, but that's roughly around what we're seeing in the marketplace.
Okay, thank you. Just want to confirm.
Okay. Anything further on the strategic planning update? Seeing no speakers on receipt. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Now move on to our audit findings report and financial statements for 2021 fiscal year. Thank you. Moved by Director Unger, seconded by Director Grieve. And
Thank
the staff.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Directors. And our Manager of Financial Operations, Katie Powell, will introduce Corey Vanderhurst from MNP and the discussion of the audit findings and financial statements.
Thank you, Russell, and good morning. Through the chair to the directors, the financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2021 are being provided today for approval. In addition to the financial statements, MNP has also prepared their audit findings report. In compliance with Canadian audit standards, the financial statements are being presented for approval prior to a finalized auditor's report being included. As Russell mentioned, Corey Vanderhurst from MNP is on the call today and is going to provide an overview of the financial statements and audit findings. Before I hand things over to Corey, I would just like to take an opportunity to thank the team from MNP for their flexibility and assistance with the year-end process. And with that, I'll pass things off to Corey.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Hello, everyone. Good to see you this morning. Hoping everybody can hear me okay. You've got the report in front of you from staff. A big thank you to Katie and the finance team for helping us with the audit this year. Take you through a brief highlights. Actually, page 2 of your staff report is a really good summary there. So I'm going to start there. In the middle, the annual revenues. So the key item there, of course, being the drop in requisitions that was budgeted and planned for. So you see the revenues decreased from 17.5 million to 12.9 for 2021. Expenses again do fluctuate with Island Health requests, but a decrease in expenses to $2.7 million in 2021, and just over $1 million of transfers to reserve. So the hospital district is carrying financial assets of 27.6 million, most of that being the 25 million of reserves, and liabilities of 66.6. So the biggest item there being the debt for the new hospitals that is being paid down on schedule. With respect to our audit, I'm happy to be able to provide another clean audit opinion for the hospital district this year. We are satisfied that your financial statements are not materially misstated. Materiality being the theoretically the number that would change your decision or a threshold that would change a decision that you're going to make. So the materiality drives our audit testing. Important to note that with the decrease in revenues for the year and the requisition, we decreased our materiality accordingly because that is what we use to drive that calculation. So we dropped materiality from $700,000 to $500,000 for 2021. We look at every transaction over that, which is mostly the requisitions and the debt payments, but then we sample test underneath. So the rest of the audit findings report is very no news is good news type of report. Nothing to bring to the board's attention. Again, I'm going to tell you for a record for those of you that see me multiple times this year, but just a reminder that we're not specifically looking for fraud. We're not forensic investigators. When we do the financial statement audit, we are just looking to verify that the financial statement numbers are accurate. So with that in mind, we didn't find any issues around fraud or suspected fraud that came to our attention. Staff didn't bring anything to our attention. So I have nothing to report out to you, and that is a good thing. But again, that is the nature of an audit, is that we're not specifically looking for it. Other than that, a clean audit, no adjustments or unadjusted items, and I will wrap up with just confirming that MNP LLP is independent of the hospital district. We didn't do any other projects or any other work from throughout 2021 and through to today, March 24th, that would impair our ability to give you an independent audit opinion. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to staff or board chair. I'm happy to answer any questions if the directors have any.
Okay, thanks, Corey. And questions of the auditor? I see Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Corey. The question I want to ask is, I don't know if you noticed doing your audit that the regional hospital district requisitioned 1.9 million last year for capital projects that didn't transpire, maybe because Island Health wasn't funding their share of it, and those monies just rolled over into reserve. But I don't know if this board voted on putting that money into reserve, but I noticed that the total went up accordingly. So is that normal?
Yeah, and maybe I'll start and then defer to staff if they want to jump in on it. But not uncommon in the hospital districts that we work with, especially given the last few years and what's been happening with Island Health, and even just to the conversation you just had of where their priorities have been, and in crisis mode is the wrong word, but in reactionary to the pandemic and where their focus has been. Not uncommon in some of the hospital districts to have planned projects that didn't happen and surpluses that have been moved into reserves. And I'll leave it at that, but if staff wants to comment specifically on any of the reserve transfer amounts that happened in 2021.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to the directors. Yeah, so as Corey alluded, once we receive that annual project plan from Island Health, we do reflect that in the annual financial plan. If for some reason, we don't end up expending those grants, they would come through to the next financial planning year by way of surplus, and then we would be reporting out to the directors how we're recommending those be allocated. Most often that would be yes to reserves.
Okay. That answer your question, Director?
Well, that decision hasn't been made by the board yet because we haven't passed our financial plan. But my experience has always been that normally when you have an unspent amount that you taxed for last year, that surplus would move into the next year's budget, and it wouldn't go into reserves. It would go into reducing the taxes the following year if the money had not been spent for the purpose that it was taxed, the intended purpose, which was capital project. So if that didn't happen, then that should be reducing the budget for 2022, in my opinion.
Good question to ask when we get to the financial plan. But right now we're on the audit report from Myers Norris Penny. So thank you. I have Director Davis, then Director Evans.
Thank you, Chair. This might be a bit premature, but the thing that jumps out at me right now is the $4.5 million drop in revenues. I'm just looking for an explanation of how we got there.
Sure. Thank you, Director Davis. And again, the key number there is the budgeted drop in requisitions. The requisitions in 2020 were in the financial plan for 17 million and reduced in 2021 to 12.6. So that would have been in the financial plan and not a result of anything other than what you were planning for.
Right. So just my recollection is that the board passed a resolution to decrease the requisition by $5 million last year. And that's the reflection, or roughly 5.
Thank you.
Okay. Director Evans.
Thank you, Chair. And just a question related to point 5, which is accumulated deficit. Just in the note there, it's talking about the fact that it will be recovered from future tax requisitions as a fairly generic statement. And I'm just wondering, on an audit report, would risks show up anywhere if what we were projecting to recover in terms of deficit did not end up moving in a positive direction in terms of tax requisition? Would that show anywhere in the audit, Or would it be more just in the financial plan and be stated as what was intended for that particular year? Just trying to grapple with, I guess, risk if it did not move the way that we had hoped with tax requisition. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Director Evans. Good question. So it wouldn't necessarily show up in the financial statements themselves, but from time to time, if there is a significant risk around transactions and plans and things that impacted on the hospital district or any other organization and their ability to go forward, we would put some comments in the audit findings around that. Sometimes if it's a major problem, we call it a going concern problem. Other times, if it's something that there's a stumble for a year, but there's a plan to fix it, we'll add some comments in it. For example, if reserves are woefully inadequate for what's going on, or you can't stay on top of debt servicing, we would make comments. The accumulated deficit there, I mean, a $10 million improvement year over year is significant. The deficit also sort of, I mean, with the hospital's project, my understanding is it would have been the plan to be carrying a deficit like this for several years with the debt that was incurred. And that's sort of where the hospital district lands. But yes, if something went off the rails for whatever reason, we would talk about it in the audit findings. And if it's bad enough, we would ask for an in-camera session.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any further questions? I'm not seeing any. So on the audit, financials and report, or at least the audit report by Myers Norris Penny. Anything further?
Approve the audit financial status on audit report.
Yeah, we have to vote on the receipt motion first.
Okay, I'll make that motion after.
Cute. So on receipt, anything further? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Subsequent.
Move approval of financial status report and audit report.
Okay, thank you. And seconded by alternate Director Price. Oh, any discussion? Not seeing any. So anyone opposed? Motion carries. On to the item 4, the recommended budget. So moved by Director Gree, seconded by Vice Chair Hillian. And
thank you, Chair and Directors. Yes, and Kevin DeVell, the acting CFO, will present the recommended budget report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Russell. Once again, good morning to the directors through the chair. The 2022 recommended budget that's being presented to you today represents a close to status quo budget, similar to that outlined in the provisional budget that was presented to and approved by the Hospital District Board back on November 18th of 2021. Exceptions to this include the addition of a prior year surplus and a resulting reserve contribution, along with a couple of other small updates now included in that recommended budget that I'll be speaking to momentarily. The recommended tax requisition for 2022 is 12.6 million, which is unchanged from 2021. This results in an estimated residential tax rate per thousand of taxable value in 2022 of 0.2901. What that equates to for a home assessed at $600,000 is a tax impact of 174.06, or for a home at 500,000, that would be a tax impact of 145.05. The participant apportionments that are provided in Appendix A have been recalculated using the 2022 completed assessment roll that was received back in early January. And these will be recalculated for a final time once the 2022 revised roll is received later on this month. The total overall 2022 recommended budget is 17.5 million, which is 1.5 million greater than 2021. An annual funding contribution of 1.85 million for minor equipment and projects is again included in the budget. That is again same as prior years and is funded entirely through the current year requisition, as has happened in the past. The annual unconditional grant amounts, as the Deputy CEO referred to, have been increased from 5,000 to 10,000 for each per named facility other than hospitals. And so that total contribution now equates to $60,000. And as the Deputy CEO mentioned, this will be reflected in an update to our hospital district financial planning policy. The administrative charge by CVRD is recommended to increase modestly to $200,000 from $151,000, a level it has remained at since 2012. And that's just representative of the increased complexity and work that staff are undertaking in support of the board's strategic priorities and directions. Prior year equipment and projects between $5,000 and $10,000. There is a carry forward of projects of just over $2 million included in the financial plan. With respect to major capital projects greater than 1.5, while we are awaiting receipt of the 2022-2023 capital project and equipment funding request from Island Health, this doesn't hamper the ability for the financial plan to be approved, given that, as I just previously stated, these are funded entirely through the current year tax requisition, and therefore there is no impact to the current tax requisition. However, when that report is received, staff will be bringing that back to the board for its review and deliberation. And at that time, we could then, initiate a budget amendment to bring those recommendations into the financial plan. Lastly, on that vein, we have carried forward just over $500,000 for balances of 4 key projects, one being the UHMD project. On respect of the debt, the annual MFA debt servicing consists of $7.9 million in principal payments and $2.9 million for interest. And as Corey Vanderhorst alluded to, all the debt is continuing to be on track and slated for the hospital debt to be paid out in full in 2028. Future expenditure reserve contribution in 2022, we've budgeted just over 1.9 million. And that is again being fully funded by that carry forward from 2021 of just over 2 million, which again is resulting from largely the unspent capital dollars that we just spoke to previously. And lastly, the total fund expenditure reserve balance at the end of December 2021 was 25.1 million, and that was noted within the draft financial statements. So that's my report on the recommended financial plan. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And hands, Director Wally, and then who's at seat 17? Oh, Director Grieve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is that you mentioned that there was additional administrative costs due in part to our strategic priorities plans and staff time spent on that. So my question is, and you'll probably have to just give me an estimate on this, but we've been dealing with strategic priorities, I think, for the last 3 years. What would you estimate would be the total cost that we have spent so far, including the staff time and the facilitators and everything thrown in? What are
It's not something that we have in hand. It's something that I could definitely get back to you at. I think the difference between what we've done in the past and what we are allocating funds for at this time is, in the past, it's been part of the administration and function of this board that staff help and assist the board in setting priorities and doing such work. What's different now is we are acting on some very complex initiatives that will require extra work for us to coordinate with Island Health to bring forward the concepts of consolidation of services in the Comox Valley and long-term care in the Strathcona district. So it's more work to be done to initiate those. But if the board is wanting figures as to what has been spent in the past in terms of strategic planning, we can certainly look at that and bring something back to you, but it's not something I have in hand.
Thank you. I appreciate you take a look at that, including what we're going to spend this year, if you just give us a sum total of the whole shot.
They asked and answered. Director Grieve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the chair and the CAO to staff. I think I've asked this question before, but I've been looking through the financials and the audit, and although we mentioned the contribution of 25,120 into reserves, and although we get our money through MFA, I believe we don't use MFA for our reserves. Is that correct?
Through the chair to the director. So yeah, we look at various options for when we're allocating our reserve contributions. Currently, our primary lender is RBC, but we also do use the high interest pooled lending option with MFA, and we will continue to always look at those options. And in fact, we are intending to bring back, some information with respect to ongoing investment strategy going forward.
Well, I definitely would suggest that we look to supporting our own financial association rather than adding millions of dollars of bonuses to CAOs of major banks. And I think it's only fair that we revisit the other option, because I think there's a lot of investment opportunities at MFA, and I don't see our MFA rep here right now, but a lot of them are sustainable type investments, green investments and whatever. So I do think we have to revisit that. We don't need to support the fat cats in Montreal and Toronto.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question through to our financial manager or whoever can answer this question. So 17.5 million in our capital budget, and this board only finances capital at the moment. We're not, we're supposed to be matched by Island Health with 60%. And their 60% of times 17.5 million would be 28 million. So how do we know that Island Health is contributing, or Vancouver Island Health Authority is contributing their 28 million to our hospitals and our named facilities? Do we know that?
Director Lee, when you bring something up like this, could you make reference to the page in the report so that everybody can see where you're at?
I was just going by what Kevin said about the total in our budget, 17.5 million. And I thought, well, that seems really low. I mean, we're spending 47 million on the solid waste plan. So where's the other money coming from? It comes 60% from Vancouver Island Health Authority for their 60% of capital costs, right? So I don't know for sure that they are contributing their 60%, but it would be 28 million, which would bring it up to what we're spending on solid waste, approximately 45.5 million. I just wanted to know that they're putting in their $28 million in capital costs.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair to the directors. So the 17 million that I referenced is a combination of the operating budget and then what we have designated in capital for funding capital projects. So that's where that number derives from, and that's the annual budget with respect to the hospital district. With respect to Island Health and ensuring that it is providing its contributions, of course, as part of the approved project list, we do reconcile that on an ongoing basis, and that reconciliation does break down each individual project and the contributions being made both by Island Health and by the hospital district.
So sort of clear as mud. Are they putting in their 60% share of our capital projects then?
Mr. Chair, the hospital district's budget reflects the total commitment that we have to conduct meetings, to undertake audits, to do the finances, to support the administration, and to undertake these things. And a portion of the budget includes our contribution towards capital projects. And as Kevin explained, that when a capital project is approved, it is on the basis of that 60-40 split, Island Health making the commitment at that time and seeing to it that their portion of the costs are paid, whether it's hospitals or the minor capital that we agree to on an annual basis.
Okay. Thank you. Any other speakers? Not seeing any on the motion. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, receipt carries. On to the recommendation. Thank you. So moved by Director or Vice Chair Hillian and seconded by alternate Director Price. On the motion, any further discussion? Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. And go to bylaws and resolutions.
Move first and second of the bylaw 298 annual budget bylaw 2022.
Okay. Thank you. Moved by Director Lee, seconded by Director Unger. Any discussion on first and second? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Third reading. Price and Davis. Any discussion on third? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. On adoption.
Move adoption.
Hillian and Lee. Any discussion? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do we have 2/3 affirmative? Thank you. Just wanted to make sure we got all the details covered. Item 2 for Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District Capital Expenditure Bylaw number 299, 2022.
99.
Okay. So first and second concurrently, discussion. Seeing none, call a question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Third reading. Unger and Hillian. On third, any discussion? Seeing none. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. On final adoption. Davis and Price. Any discussion? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And no new business, no addendum. Any media questions? None. No television news stories or anything else. So your favorite motion, who's going to move it?
Move termination.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the silent majority has spoken. I think pick anyone's names, Lisa, and we've got it. Anyway, thank you, board, for your attendance today. And